Good morning and welcome. I am Emer Cook, the Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency. We're here today to tell you more about EMA's extended mandate and why it matters. Just over 2 years ago, we were at the brink of the worst health crisis for over 100 years. We activated our health threats plan. We set up a dedicated COVID-19 pandemic task force, and this was key to the fast-track development and evaluation of medicines and vaccines. In those 2 years, we have authorized 5 new vaccines and 8 new therapeutics for COVID-19 at unprecedented speeds. EMA has been at the forefront of the EU's work to address the pandemic, setting up initiatives to help monitor and manage shortages within the network. We also managed to mitigate drug shortages as supplying countries went into lockdown. Intensive care occupancy skyrocketed, logistics became more complicated, and export bans added additional complexity. We did well, but we can do better. Exactly a month ago, the regulation reinforcing EMA's role in crisis preparedness and management for medicinal products and medical devices entered into application. Crisis preparedness and management of crisis is more relevant than ever before. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to put strain on healthcare systems around the world. In addition, we're now facing the consequences of the war in Ukraine and the resultant humanitarian crisis. The new mandate formalizes the structures that EMA had already put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it also provides additional tools that further strengthen us as a network to react quickly and efficiently in future crises. EMA will monitor how public health emergencies affect the supply of critical medicines and now has the tool to formally coordinate actions at EU level to guarantee the supply of medicines. The EMA's Pandemic Task Force is now formally enshrined into legislation as the Emergency Task Force, or ETF, and this reinforces its role in supporting the development of new medicines, in supporting their authorization, and also safety monitoring, both during the current crisis and in preparation for any future crises. The mandate also gives EMA a new competency in the field of medical devices, enabling it to monitor the supply of critical medical devices, which will come into force after a transitional period. We are also responsible already since the 1st of March for coordinating the EU expert panels that support and advise on the scientific assessment of certain medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. With this in mind, it's my great pleasure to open this workshop on EMA's extended mandate and to welcome everyone watching the live broadcast and those who have joined the virtual meeting room. We have representatives from patient and healthcare professional organizations. We have representatives from academia. We have representatives from industry, from HTA bodies, and from National Medicines Agency. Although today's meeting will be focused on EMA's extended mandate, our work takes place in the wider context of a European health union, and this aims to provide stronger surveillance, scientific analysis and guidance before and during future crises. This is why we have with us today the European Commission, DG Sante and DG HERA, and the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, ECDC. Together, we aim to give you a picture of the wider context into which EMA's new roles will fit. With this first public meeting, we want to share with you what EMA and other public health bodies are doing to implement the new legislation. We will highlight benefits and implications for stakeholders, and we want to listen to your questions and concerns and to address these as much as possible. We want to benefit from your insights and to get your support and collaboration to help us deliver on this important milestone in strengthening the EU response to public health emergencies. Since use of real-world data will be key to support crisis preparedness and response, continuation of the amazingly fruitful engagement we have enjoyed with you, our stakeholders, will lie at the heart of any future developments. It's my pleasure now to hand the floor over to Fergus Sweeney, EMA's Head of Clinical Studies and Manufacturing, who will moderate today's event. Over to you, Fergus.
Thank you very much, Emer, and good morning, everyone. It's really going to be an interesting day. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this important meeting. I will be moderating during the day and joined for the different sessions by expert session chairs. As explained by Emer Cook, our Executive Director, this meeting is organised to inform you about the adopted legislation and EMA's new tasks. It explains plans for the implementation of EMA's new processes and their timelines. We want to listen to your views and concerns, so there'll be opportunities to ask questions both from the floor and via Slido during the different sessions. And we'll discuss processes and opportunities for engagement and collaboration, which will come in the future also. We'll start the meeting by providing the wider context of the EU's work on addressing future health threats with an introduction by the European Commission, followed by contributions from EMA, from Ecdc, and from HERA. We will also hear opening statements from representatives of key stakeholder groups. I think it's important that we hear from you all because it's really an important part of the new mandate that the elements of stakeholder outreach and engagement are expressed both in the legislation and in our practices. Now, we want to collect views from members of the public who are following the meeting via Slido, so please prepare your devices, log into slido.com with hashtag EMA extended mandate. And my colleagues will show a slide when the time comes later in the session, which also has the QR code. After a short coffee break, then, the meeting will continue with 3 main sessions. So in this first session, we won't have a Q&A per se, but in the following more explicit sections, we will do that. So the first session will address EMA's responsibilities in monitoring and mitigating shortages of medicines and devices. The second session will focus on addressing public health emergencies through the Emergency Task Force, the ETF. And the final session will cover EMA's role in coordinating expert panels on medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. Now, as I've said, as part of each of these sessions, we will have ample time to listen and respond to the views and questions from participants with the support of panels of experts in these sessions. Each of them will have a short introductory presentation, and then there'll be ample time for questions, and we will have the Slido open in each of these sessions also. By the end of the meeting, we hope you will have a better understanding of the transition from existing structures to structures and procedures based on the new regulation, including for the management of shortages of both medicinal products and medical devices, with different modalities and timelines for both. The formalization now and the transition of the old emergency task force, if I can call it that, the COVID-19 emergency task force, which has been operating over the last several years, to the new emergency task force in the context of this new legislation, and EMA's support for expert panels on medical devices. As we conclude the day, we also expect to have a better understanding of your expectations and concerns. This meeting is being broadcast and recorded. We encourage that all participants to turn on their cameras, but those who do not wish to appear in the recording may turn off their web camera. So without further delay, I will give the floor to the European Commission, DG Sante, who will introduce the new legislation as part of the overall Commission's efforts for a strong European health union. And this will give us a broad overview of the whole context, and then we'll continue with the more specific points on the roles of ECDC, EMA, and HERA. So please, European Commission, you have the floor.
So thank you to all those who are here. And I mean it, thank you in the sense of all the work you have been doing over the last 2 years or more. And let's say also for the work you will continue to do, because apparently COVID is not leaving us. And even more challenges are looming in the offing for all of us. So thank you from my heart. You have been my pals together with Andrea, Ammon in this adventure, Emer. it is not finished yet. We can see we're now struggling with the 4th dose. You know, this is now the next task, the next challenge. So I hope I'm amongst friends here. I was told that the audience is composed of people that basically are in the know of all that we do, so that, you know, this is not an audience that is, you know, we need to cultivate with pedagogical speeches. So I go immediately to the core of, I would say, what I want to say. This is a very difficult context that we have around. You can see it from my pin. And I think it matters for EMA, and it matters for one of the missions that you have. Of course, you know, we have been on the 11th of November 2020. I still remember the mad moments, you know, when we were launching all the things, because, you know, in that year there was a lot of activity around health. Everybody wanted to have more and more things around health. So we launched a big health union package. There was the revision of the mandate of the EMA, Ecdc, but also, you know, I would say cross-border health threats, from which the big flower of HERA was born. So let me say to you, these were momentous, I would say, papers that we produced, and they are bringing fruit, bringing all that they needed to bring. We still are having trialogues on the cross-border health threats. The last piece, which I often quote or describe as a software. Without that, it's very difficult. But in actual fact, your new mandate is, I would say, entered into force on the 1st of March this year, apart from a small part that we will mention later. So I would say congratulations, you are already in your new skin. And I hope it fits your aspirations as an agency, but also as a driving motor for all that is medicines in Europe. You know, we are a bit in a competition in this respect, and we can see it all too clearly with all the other agencies in the world and with all the other systems that, you know, get innovations, get elements that, you know, attract investment. So it is important that EMA stays as a massively effective and efficient component of our system. So, as I was saying, there were lessons learned. We went ahead with the health union package, and, you know, obviously, from the point of view of what we wanted to have, is something where we could have teamwork, cooperation. This will be the leitmotif of all my words here. We need to work better across DGs, across agencies, at European level, because, you know, at the very beginning we had some struggles. This is why we have Hera here today present, Andrea here today present, and I rejoice at this, because, you know, we have different instruments, different structures, but we need to work together. Now, I know you will be presenting the extension of the mandate to all the stakeholders here, and I think it's a very good initiative. So congratulations for taking the initiative on that. I would say that I still remember my first days of the pandemic, when there was Guido Rasi, and, you know, I had Marco Cavalleri, and, you know, I was completely new, and I was trying to understand. So poor Marco suffered more than one call with me not being knowledgeable of many things. So my feeling was that it was extremely important, if not vital, that EMA adopted this rolling review approach for the vaccines. It was really a huge, massive boon. It helped us. It helped us to keep abreast with all that was being done also elsewhere, not necessarily in Europe. So I would like to say that the assessment of the COVID-19s and the emergency task force, they have been vital for me, for all European citizens, because without these two things, we would have been, I would say, in a very ugly place, and I would say without even a paddle to come out. So the regulation tried to reflect at best, but then, you know, in the trialogues, things go, things come in. What sort of approach we thought was best? I think the EMA mandate was extended with a sufficient degree of ambition. I think it reflects very well where we wanted to be for our response to future crises. I would say that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have had all the mandate implemented since 1st of March, but there is a small part concerning monitoring and mitigating shortages of critical medical devices, which still is going to be applied, I think, if I'm not wrong, on 2nd of February 2023. So my briefing says that I need to highlight your tasks, and I will do so dutifully because my colleagues prepare for me beautiful briefings and I need to do justice to that, but also because I believe it's good that I recap what we think is, you need to know what we expect now from EMA. So we expect, of course, the monitoring and the mitigation of the risk of shortages in medicines and medical devices, especially for the critical lists. And here we have had many discussions with EMA, what is critical, what is not critical. So I hope one day we will have some further discussions. We refer to health emergencies, but let me say, and here comes the pin, when you have very difficult situations like an aggression on Ukraine by the Russians and all that ensues, meaning, I would say, a disruption of supply chains, you must understand that we are regularly meeting at Director General's level for Ukraine because there are many things that are happening, and it's good that we all partake of the griefs and sorrows of every single DG. So the shortages in a disrupted supply chain are, I would say, very probable. So it's very good that we have EMA to help us there. There is also the issue of the interoperable IT platform at European level to enable the monitoring of the reporting of the shortages of medicinal products. On this one is a huge task, and it's clearly something that will require our attention. Then obviously I have been privy to the good scientific advice of EMA and also the Ecdc, but for EMA I'm waiting to have all the scientific advice possible on medicines that may have the potential to treat or to diagnose even diseases that may cause also public health emergencies. I think that EMA is really the drawers of EMA are brimful with very good things that could become realities in the future, and there is a discussion that we are having also on this topic. Coordination of the studies to monitor the effectiveness and the safety of vaccines. Well, I don't need to stress that. I would say coordinate the clinical trials. This is also a major, massive piece of work for all medicinal products, and here I think it's really we really depend on the EMA for all this precious work. Obviously we also expect EMA to provide all the support for the expert panels of the medical device regulation. Now I would say that the legislation also has formally established I would say medicines and medical services, medical devices shortages steering groups, which is a very good thing. This is formal now, and the emergency task force also is formalized. So these are pieces which are now enshrined in legislation. I would say that these are precious as fora because they link all the member states and with the member states ourselves. So let me say we are benefiting from the expertise here that can be gathered in this fora and these groups. Now, I know that I would not be doing justice if I were not to mention that EMA will work with the Commission to prepare a response to health crisis. I would say that EMA is better placed to somehow assess what sort of regulatory flexibility or changes that we may need for the procurement and the deployment of medicines, countermeasures, I would say, in emergencies. Now, I must say that the regulation is also a first step to go towards a better management of shortages. So I hope that this function will really be quite well followed and exploited, I would say, even by us Commission in all services. Now, I would simply like to conclude by saying that the spirit of today's discussion should be that of cooperation. We need to work well together. I have nothing to complain. We have been working very well with EMA. I'm very grateful. We have, I would say now, some legal interlinks between all the actors of the health union. You know, DG Sante still stays very prominent in all the elements of public health. DG HERA is dealing with the countermeasures. So, I mean, I would say we are now in a much better place than we were when I arrived in this DG, where, you know, we were dealing with the countermeasures with I would say, on a string, on a piece of string, really. So now, in all of this, I would like to mention the role I expect EMA to have in helping us also on a big building site, and Emer knows the pharmaceutical strategy. This is going to be, I would say, almost the missing piece in all that we are doing together for the future of Europe, to have a future-proof legislation. There are many topics that go under the label pharma strategy, and these topics, you know, need to have the patient at the center. We need to go, of course, for, I would say, affordability of medicines, but, you know, without medicines existing, they are definitely not going to be affordable. So we need to have an environment that promotes innovation, that promotes research, that somehow gives to the patients the best treatment available, you know. So availability comes first and foremost, and for availability, we need to foster a climate of innovation. And here I'm looking at Fergus, who is on my screen. We had a long discussion also on trials and on all of this. So there's a big set of issues. I don't think you will go there today, but let me say thank you from my heart, because without EMA, we would not have managed the COVID-19 crisis. I hope I did justice to my colleagues who had a fantastic brief, but I cannot read, also because I'm very short-sighted. So, you know, this is the way I interpret their notes.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And really, I think we all share the energy to move these initiatives forward. It's really important for the whole of our European citizens, and indeed citizens in the wider world, because I think we contribute so much there. So as you've heard from Sandra, the European Medicines Agency, ECDC, and the European Commission have complementary roles in the context of the European Health Union. And in the slide we are presenting now, you can see how collaboration and stakeholder engagement are essential elements in the European health emergency preparedness context. You'll hear from the directors of the EMA, ECDC, and HERA about how their different organizations will contribute, and also, of course, from DG Sante. But at the core of this is a set of complementary activities. We are working together, carefully aligning what we're doing so that each contributes to the other, and we all contribute to our citizens and their better future. So I'm really very pleased now to be able to initiate the next part of the session, where
Bless you all, huh? God bless us all, because, you know, it's a difficult time. Thank you. Take care. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.
And we will now hear from our director, Emer Cook, director of EMA, Andrea Ammon, ECDC executive director, and Wolfgang Philippe from the European Commission, who's acting director and deputy head of DG HERA, to share their reflections on how they see each other's roles and responsibilities in this context. So to continue, I pass the floor now to Emer. Emer, the floor is yours.
Well, Thank you very much, Fergus, and thanks to Sandra, though I know she's not still online, but really to give a flavour of the exciting times that we're in and the need for close collaboration and cooperation for us really to deliver on the ambition of the cross-border health threats. We are very, very proud to be part of the Commission's vision for a European Health Union. We see the extension of the EMA's mandate not only as an acknowledgement of the work that we've done over the past 2 years, but also as an opportunity to deliver better on our responsibilities for EU citizens. If we want to do this well, we need close collaboration with all of our partners. So this means DG Sante, this means DG HERA, this means the ECDC, and we need to have the right platforms in place to support, coordinate, and evaluate all aspects relating to medicines and devices. So as you've heard, the new regulation puts several of the structures and processes in place onto a permanent footing. And I'm not going to talk more about this now because you will hear about these in great detail over the next couple of hours. So just let me mention some of the things that maybe haven't been covered in the initial introductions. I think the role, EMA's key role in providing scientific advice to developers, including on clinical trial protocols, we really feel this as being something that will help us speed up clinical trial approval during public health emergencies. And of course, the carrying out of rolling reviews that you've just heard about helps us to speed up regulatory assessments in crisis situations. And this means that we can help to facilitate patient access to much needed medicines. Our coordinating role in shortages, both for medicines and medical devices, will be vital to mitigate these in the future, and you'll learn about the 2 groups that have been set up in the new sessions. And as Sandra mentioned, the ambitious EU shortages monitoring platform will allow EMA and the member states to track information on shortages, but also to pave the way for a one-stop point of information for stakeholders on supply disruptions for medicines. The implementation of this platform will require significant IT and business resource investment. And as it wasn't anticipated as part of the original package, we have to be very, very careful about how we will resource these additional tasks so that we can deliver on this platform by 2025. We've also been given a longer period for implementation of the new tasks on shortages of critical medical devices. And this is important because it will help us to build the necessary expertise, the necessary networks and the tools to help coordinate this work in what is essentially a new area for us. We will be working even more closely with Ecdc on measures related to vaccine effectiveness, and this will build on our COVID experience. But we also need to work with national public authorities on safety monitoring studies using relevant real-world data. This is important because real-world evidence has provided key knowledge on the safety and effectiveness of medicines, and this has enabled us as regulators to adjust booster recommendations, to monitor vaccine effectiveness, and indeed to make recommendations on certain groups such as pregnant women. Making the most of high quality real world evidence available to support crisis preparedness and response is one of the key goals of the recently established pan-European network Darwin EU. This real world interrogation network on data sources, a federated data model, will help to provide EMA's scientific committees with real-world information from the healthcare databases that exist across the EU. And the vision is that by 2025, the use of real-world evidence will be firmly established across the spectrum of regulatory use cases. The very specific and limited role for EMA in the area of medical devices is is a pragmatic solution which will help us to enable monitoring and mitigation of shortages of certain medical devices during public health emergencies. And this is extremely important because during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was not such a structure that was able to coordinate these activities. You'll hear later on today about our expert panels. Already since the 1st of March, so already a month ago, we took over the job from the Joint Research Centre, and we now coordinate the EU expert panels to support and advise on the scientific assessment of certain medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. But let me be very clear, the new regulation does not give EMA a regulatory role in the field of medical devices, and this will remain with the national notified bodies. We have been working very, very intensively to be ready to implement the new legal mandate. We have undertaken an extensive analysis of the consequences of the changes to be implemented, and we've developed a detailed roadmap for the implementation. As I said, this will build on the activities that we already put place during the pandemic. But I want to stress the importance of stakeholder engagement, the importance of communication, the importance of transparency and international cooperation. These are critical functions, not only in crisis response, but also in our collective preparedness to face the challenges ahead. Patient and healthcare professional input is key to the effectiveness and of our regulatory processes. We need input on specific knowledge, and we need this real life experience to help us to do our job better. The new mandate enhances opportunities for involvement of patients and healthcare professionals, in addition to the already well-established platforms that we have, the Patient and Consumers Working Party and the Healthcare Professionals Working Party. Patient and healthcare professional representatives will be members of the Emergency Task Force, and they'll also be part of the steering groups from medicines and medical device shortages. As always, we count on the regulatory network in the EU, we count on our partners, we count on our stakeholders to work together with us to ensure a smooth and successful implementation. Dialogues, as we have today, are essential to keep us on track. I now hand over to Andrea Ammon, the Executive Director of the ECDC, who will tell us about how we can work together and give us some more insights from the ECD's perspective. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Emma, and good morning to you, to all colleagues and all participants. I'm very happy to be part of this event and congratulate you to your new mandate, because unlike you, we are still in our old skin, but we hope to shed it soon when our new mandate is also approved. We, as the two agencies, have a long history of collaboration. We have a collaboration agreement already since 2012. And the ambitions set out in the European Health Union give us the opportunity to strengthen this collaboration and to strengthen then also our ability to improve the EU level protection and better prepare for and respond to health crises. We are proud to be part, like EMA, to be part of this vision set out and proposed by the Commission. And we see that our this proposal acknowledges and bolsters our role in several of the critical public health functions that we coordinate, and many of these functions are closely related to the way we work with EMA. So the main area of collaboration with EMA is in the area of vaccines and immunization. And there, both of our new mandates actually reinforce this collaboration and the way that we continue in the future, because we have seen that building a strong relation and a strong bridge between the regulatory and the public health dimensions of vaccine assessments is critical for the the success of vaccination efforts in Europe. And we have seen this particularly during the pandemic because it has proven that regulatory assessments and public health recommendations can evolve and go through adaptations very quickly. So we must ensure the right evidence base for decision making and the right model to communicate to the public the underpinning rationale with consistency in order to create trust. We need scientific decisions that are informed by each other's work in the interest of EU citizens' health. In this regard, collaboration between our network of the EU NITACs, that are the national immunization technical advisory groups that are responsible for recommending vaccination strategies to the ministries of health in the member states, and the EMA's regulatory experts have been paramount in the past month. The new mandates and ways of working of our two agencies will enable a continued structured dialogue between us and our respective public health and regulatory networks. As you just mentioned, Emma, the joint work by EMA and ECDC for real-world monitoring of vaccines is also a critical part of our agency's new mandate, both of our agencies' new mandate. We have already established and is invested in a solid base for this work with an initial focus on COVID vaccines, of course. But the idea is to extend this to all priority vaccines and their use in immunization programs in the EU to have an effective mechanism for the sustainable and independent post-authorization monitoring. Real life data on effectiveness and safety is the driver of sound public health recommendations and adaptations for vaccination strategies that we need to safeguard the protection of individuals and communities, populations. Our new mandates grant earmarked funds for this work, and it will be implemented by the national competent public authorities in the member states. This is critical in order to build trust in the quality of the evidence that we generate, and and what we generate is fit for purpose to inform decision making, whether in the field of public health or in the regulatory field. And regarding the issue of trust, I cannot emphasize enough the need to massively invest in adequate, tailored, and sound communication to our citizens and health professionals on the science behind the vaccines and the decision making. Together with EMA, we have also established the European Vaccination Information Portal that is aiming to provide objective and transparent and authoritative information to lay audience on vaccines and vaccination in all official EU languages. The new ECDC mandate also echoes further the need to improve communications to members of the public at large and training of health professionals. And we will certainly continue to endeavor in these areas. Together with EMA, we have also organized national public with national public health authorities in Bulgaria, Estonia, and Romania webinars addressing key questions of public health professionals in these countries around COVID-19 vaccination uptakes and vaccines as such. And here I'm really grateful that we could do this together. So to assure and ensure that the agencies have comprehensive and complementary support to EU member states where COVID-19 vaccination uptake is lower than the EU average. So that is our joint work on vaccination, immunization. But I would also like to mention the collaboration on antimicrobial resistance between actually not only the two of us, but also with the European Food Safety Authority, recognizing that human and animal health are interconnected based on the One Health approach. So I am very pleased that the third report of this collaboration, the joint interagency report on antimicrobial consumption and antimicrobial resistance in bacteria from humans and food-producing animals, has been published last year, and we will certainly continue this collaboration. So I look forward to continue our close collaboration with EMA and the EMA colleagues in these areas, and establishing an even stronger link between our agencies. In this respect, I also welcome the close collaboration that we are in the process of establishing with the newly created HERA, with a memorandum of understanding between our agencies being in good progress. DG Santé has been instrumental in supporting our work and in setting out the European Health Union plans and vision, and throughout the whole process emphasized the need for a stronger role and mandate both for EMA and Ecdc. And with these words, I would like to pass the floor to Wolfgang Philipp, the acting director of HERA. Please, Wolfgang.
Many thanks, Andrea, and also many thanks to the organizers, to EMA and EMA, for the kind invitation today to present to you the newly established Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, which is a service inside the Commission. So it's DG HERA. So this is even more important now, since we only exist since half a year, and we are working on our establishment towards becoming operational, and work closely in cooperation with other services of the Commission, and also with the two key agencies, the EMA and the Ecdc. So just to frame it, HERA is one of the key elements of the European Health Union, Sandra mentioned it already, but it's a response to the need, which was early on identified during the COVID-19 pandemic, to ensure swift availability of key medical countermeasures to respond to the crisis. The idea behind HERA is not only to create a response mechanism, but also to ensure and to improve foresight and preparedness capacities, in particular in both areas around epidemiology and supply chains, and to reinforce the EU health security architecture beyond a cooperation that would end simply in recommendations. The US BARDA, which was mentioned during the pandemic very often as a good example, gave obviously some inspiration, although the concept was extended and adapted to the EU reality. The pandemic stressed the need of a closer cooperation between the 27 member states, and a good example is the implementation of the vaccine strategy. This setup, as well as limitations of the EU competencies in the founding treaties of the EU, determine the HERA tools and mechanisms of action. Just to summarize it, HERA is a full end-to-end solution, starting with intelligence gathering functions, assessments, research and development, production and delivery of essential medical countermeasures that would help to respond to upcoming health emergencies. So HERA is a Director General inside the Commission in its full rights, and was created to mobilize all existing Commission powers, tools and programs to streamline the EU response to cross-border health threats, and finally to ensure in the future the availability of medical countermeasures to all kinds of threats, including civilian threats of natural or man-made origin, of natural, intentional or unintentional release. So we work very closely with other Commission services, just to mention DG Santé, DG ECHO, DG RTD on the research side, and obviously DG Grow to ensure a streamlined approach, coherent policy, and effective Commission action in the area of health emergency preparedness and response. It was already mentioned that the basic role of HERA is to ensure the availability of key medical countermeasures, including medicines, medical devices, personal protective equipment, and other goods and services which are necessary to ensure a response to a crisis. We pursue three main objectives. Firstly, to improve the EU health security coordination before and during crisis. So we will ensure the link between the Commission and Member States, as well as facilitate the dialogue between Member States, the industry, as well as with the broader civil society to determine the real needs and the best way to ensure in the future availability of medical countermeasures. The second issue is around the development, the production, the procurement, the stockpiling, and obviously the equitable distribution of medical countermeasures at places where they're needed and when they're needed. And the third objective is to reinforce the global health emergency response architecture. We are developing operational links with WHO and other relevant international organizations, as well as with national counterparts of HERA-like agencies, such as the US BARDA, but also with other countries. So we have different modes of operation during preparedness in crisis times. Obviously, the maximum of the work will be concentrating on on the preparedness times, hopefully. So we will basically work to identify and prioritize threats early on. We'll gather intelligence on medical countermeasures necessary to ensure the highest level of preparedness to such identified threats. We will identify promising countermeasures and support their development, if not yet in the market, and work to detect also at the same time supply chain risks. This is obviously done in cooperation with the agencies, but also other Commission services. Finally, HERA will then ensure the availability when necessary through joint procurements, stockpiling, or any other relevant mechanism that would help to have access to such medical countermeasures. We work, basically the governance is structured through a close cooperation with Member States, in particular through the HERA boards, and then we are establishing, in addition, an advisory forum that also involves industry and civil society cooperation. In crisis times, the HERA role will be strengthened through functions which are laid out in a proposal for a council regulation, which is still under negotiation. We ensure stronger coordination with Member States, but also EMA and Ecdc through the Health Crisis Board. What will follow for what then allow for swifter decision making. HERA will activate additional mechanisms to ensure crisis response, such as reserve capacities, emergency research plans, emergency funding, very important, as well as we monitor the supply chain of key products. So the work of HERA is embedded in a broader health and pharmaceutical policy, to which obviously HERA will actively contribute. For DG HERA, EMA will be key partners, both EMA and Ecdc will be key partners both in preparedness as well as in crisis times. Looking at the EMA extended mandates, formalizing the EMA role in shortage monitoring will obviously result in important information gathered that we hope to rely on also to direct action carried out by DG HERA. We have a clear mission to ensure that key medical countermeasures are available at scale in sufficient quantities at times of needs. Signals of shortages or tensions in supply for medical countermeasures will obviously require a profound assessment. In crisis times, these links would be strengthened as a coordinated approach between HERA and EMA to deepen the intelligence on the needs in phase of health emergency, both as regards medicines, but also medical devices. We will set up, EMA will set up a list of critical crisis relevant medicines and medical devices, which would be a basis for our operational efforts. EMA will have has a key role in providing scientific advice to developers of such critical medical countermeasures, which HERA will support through emergency research funding. For example, also advanced purchase agreements as they were used for the vaccines in the current crisis, or through access to reserve manufacturing capacities. So when we conclude, we can only reiterate what the previous speakers said. This new architecture will require very close cooperation, and it's going beyond that word, not only within the Commission, but also between the Commission and the key agencies here, the EMA and the Ecdc, but also with additional stakeholders, in particular at a global level. Most importantly, a good alignment and complementarity with activities in member states are essential to ensure that we all have the right access to medical countermeasures at scale in times of need. So let us work together to ensure that in the future, the EU, that Europe is better prepared and able to respond swiftly to health emergencies than we were in the past. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Emer, Andrea, and Wolfgang. You've really made it clear how important it is to ensure coordination and collaboration, both for preparedness and crisis management. And indeed, I see in the chat, there's a good comment about engaging with the EU education domain for preparedness, as indeed education is a key part of preparedness. So something for us to reflect on. But it's now my pleasure to invite all of you in the meeting to share your views on what is the value, the added value, and your expectations for this new legislation. You can see the QR code on the website and code for the hashtag EMA extended mandate for the Slido. So please do share your views, and my colleagues will try and collate them, and we'll have a look at those already before the end of this session, and then in each of the following sessions. As we collect your views, I'd like to now invite our 5 stakeholder representatives to give a brief statement from each of them, addressing their expectations, challenges, and priorities for implementation of the new legislation, as well as how they foresee the stakeholder involvement from the particular perspective of their different communities. So I'll give the floor to the speakers. We have Adrian van den Hoven, who is Director General of Medicines for Europe, Jesus Rueda, who is Director of Strategies, Special Projects and International Affairs at MedTech Europe. Adrian will give the view from the medicines associations, and Jesus for the medical devices. Marcus Guardian, Chief Operating Officer for UNETA, for the health technology assessment bodies. Ulrich Jäger, who's co-chair of the Healthcare Professionals Working Party, so give the perspective of healthcare professionals, and Kaisa Immonen, who's co-chair of our Patients and Consumers Working Party, and she will importantly give the perspective of patients. And as you've heard, the healthcare professionals and patients are also represented in the ETF and can attend the MSSG as well, and you'll hear more about that in further sessions. So it's my pleasure now to hand the floor to Adrian van den Hoven. I think Adrian has a couple of slides. Remind all our speakers we've got 5 minutes each, so to stick to that, but everything's going well. So over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the pharmaceutical companies and industry associations. I want to just quickly rebound on some of the remarks made by Sandra and by Emer, that indeed it was great to cooperate with the EU institutions, with the relevant EU agencies, and very importantly with the national agencies during the crisis, but I fully agree we can do better. And I think where we can do better is in the context of a crisis like this situation, which really is doing better in terms of solidarity of cross-border cooperation between the national agencies, the industry, and of course, orchestrated by the EU institutions and agencies. And concretely, what this solidarity is about is when you're dealing with demand surges and shortages, it's about the willingness and an ability to share those resources across the member states, which sounds very easy, but really depends on having a huge amount of trust between regulators and industry, but also trust between member states. And for that trust, we need better data. And so this is really going to be the theme of my discussion today. How can this legislation help us work together to enable good data, to allow trust and sharing of that data, and that greater EU solidarity between EU member states? Because I can remember during the crisis, many awkward conversations with national regulatory agencies who were always pro-solidarity, and I thank them for that. But with better data, we could do this even better, even faster. So let's talk a little bit about the added value of this new legislation. In many ways, it is a great legislation because it details in a very, very good way the important things that are needed. First, it should increase the ability and agility of the EU to respond to shortages and crises. It should provide greater efficiency and predictability during major events and major shortages situations. It should enable greater collaboration with marketing authorization holders, with the industry I'm speaking on behalf of today. And most importantly, it will allow the generation of good quality data and data sharing for appropriate mining to create that trust and that solidarity basis that we need. Of course, what's important is that we're able, once we have this data, to act and to allow the quick reallocation of medicines across member states, addressing things like electronic leaflet, regulatory flexibility, which were also used during this crisis, of course. And of course, what's important is that we can work together in a coordinated way, and the EU institutions and agencies play the key role here. So what are the challenges? For us, the challenges are the risk of a fragmented implementation of this legislation, which would lead to a confusing and unusable data. We therefore need to have an IT solution that is really designed for the purpose of creating this data that can be shared across the EU. And for this, we need to have interoperability, which is easier said than done. So how can we do this? With clear governance and decision-making process on how the implementation should be done, designing clear deadlines for each building block of this database, ensuring interoperability by design across the member states, but also considering future data systems that need to be established or are already established, such as SPOR or EMVS. We want to make sure that the data codes are aligned, for example, with SPOR, to ensure we have good quality data in the future. And we want to make sure that an IT provider builds this system so that we have a system that is very functional and interoperable. What we want is that the national reporting into national agencies goes into a common database that all regulators, national and European, can use to deal with these crisis situations. And of course, we want a good business process to make sure the system works. What should be the priorities? We want a good governance model and decision-making process. We will need to work together with you, the regulators, to establish clear lists of therapeutic groups of medicines for emergency care, for surgery, for ICU, crisis lists, and we need to do this together. Of course, we need a common data set so that companies report the same thing in each member state so the data can be aggregated at a European level. And of course, we need a good IT infrastructure to make sure this data can be shared and used appropriately. And of course, longer term, we need to make sure that the appropriate links are made to other systems such as SPOR and ENVO. Now, how stakeholders should be involved? Certainly, we as the industry, we want to be supporters of this work and want to work with you as closely as possible, recognizing there are competition law limitations and issues that we need to address. We also want to work with you on the critical medicines list as discussed earlier. We want to work with you to ensure that there's maximum benefit from the future information available. So we want to design that system with you to make sure it's good and that the data inputted by industry is usable. We also want to collaborate to discuss mitigation measures. It will be very new for the EU to be involved in mitigation, as this is mainly done at national level. So we need to find the mechanisms for this to work. I have a few more slides. I know I've taken a little bit more time just outlining the process, but I'd like to just repeat the line. For us, we want to build this system with you. We believe this is critically important, and we'd like to see how we can cooperate to build that data to enable good solidarity. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Adrian. And if I could invite Jesus Guerrero now for the MedTech Europe for the devices perspective. Please go
Thank
ahead.
you very much, Fergus, and congratulations to the Medicines Agency on its new mandate.
Thank you.
It's a new chapter in the life of the agency and one that we hope to be a part of. And it actually is very timely because we see over and over how the practice of medicine itself is changing. And as the practice of medicine changes, we see a shift towards things like more personalized care and also shifts within the industry, both the medtech and the pharmaceutical industry, more towards a solutions-based approach rather than simply trying to produce any given item for a healthcare setting. And this requires a change in the thinking and in the way that these solutions are also regulated. But if we're talking about changes in the practice of medicine, it is of course impossible not to talk about COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that this has had for us all. One of the more interesting aspects for us in the new EMA mandate is the question of the management of essential medical supplies, which will include medical devices. So we are very interested in cooperating with you in doing this. Like my colleague Adrian has said, we are more than happy and would be willing to help define the kind of supplies that are essential in a pandemic. And I have to say, we have much more experience than I ever hoped to acquire in this particular topic after the past 2 years we've been through. And of course, we're also looking at how to improve and manage supply chain security. I know that there's a lot of work there going to be carried out for the pharmaceutical sector as well, but I think there's a lot that we can learn on supply chain security overall from the work that will be developed under the new mandate. All of this to say that as we move forward, there is always a growing interface between pharmaceuticals and medical devices. We see this in many ways. We have all kinds of novel combinations between medtech and pharma, in everything from normal combination products to companion diagnostics that are becoming more prevalent, and we're having more and more diagnostic solutions that are essential for the good use and good outcomes of different therapies. And we're also seeing a really big growing trend in the use of digital technologies and even AI systems to ensure the best possible outcomes for patients from a therapy. And this has all kinds of implications, and it goes from the way in which a patient himself manages his medication through to the tracking and safe administration of pharmaceuticals, which is something that medical technologies can provide a lot of support for. So we're very interested in seeing how this is going to be handled under the new mandate. Now, of course, the Medicines Agency actually has a small but critical formal role in the regulatory system of medical devices. You know, we're going to look at how expert groups are being managed by the Medicines Agency from next year onwards. There are, of course, questions where the Medicines Agency is formally consulted, be it for combination products or for companion diagnostic approvals. And we're looking at how those systems can integrate as seamlessly as possible with the existing regulatory framework for medical devices, and also to ensure that beyond the mandate, sufficient resources, both in terms of manpower, expertise, and whatever else might be necessary, to make that integration a success going forward. Because we know that a mandate is great, but you need to actually move forward and implement it. So anything we can do to help there, we're more than happy to do so. And finally, there's an interesting thing that happens between the pharmaceutical sector and the medical device sector overall, in that we learn from each other as things move forward. And there are a number of really interesting developments in the EMA mandate that we'll be watching very closely, because we expect that they're going to have an impact on us at some point or another. For example, Emer Cook mentioned the discussions and the use of real world evidence in the pharmaceutical sector. That is something that we in the medtech sector are also looking at. So I believe there are many opportunities to learn from what's going on and how these things are implemented in order to be able to provide better care for patients at the end of the day. Also things around technology assessment, procurement, and access to affordable medicines. All of these are things that we can work together on and learn from each other going forward. So we're really looking forward to a future cooperation, and it's really through cooperation that we believe that these things can be best implemented. And with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to share our views on the situation, and maybe we hand it over directly to Marcus Guardian, CEO of EU Net HTA.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank Emer and Fergus for giving us the opportunity to be here today. And I think it is, of course, celebration to see the mandate grow. Having looked at and listened to the ambitions and the scope of what is going to change, I also sort of have to state that in the true sense of the word, this is an awesome responsibility towards our society as a whole that now has bestowed upon EMA and the other elements on the European level for within the current and future mandates. So I stand in awe before that, and I'm sure, and we all are sure, that with EMA we have a very strong and resourceful agency that will live up to the expectations. I also want to say that I hope that society will provide the resources to EMA to live up to that mandate, as I imagine this is not an easy task to do. I think it was a beautiful orchestrated start of the day where we saw that EMA, of course, in concert with other players on the European level, tackle these really most important topics that we see and face in the future together. And I would only like to mention that we, of course, hope that in these tasks there's as little non-duplication as possible, that partners coordinate themselves very well amongst each other, but of course also with member states and their agencies and their representatives wherever possible. And the HTA community, of course, like the previous speakers, stand strong and ready to support wherever our mandate and scope allows us in all of these processes. We stand strong as long-standing partners to the EMA, and we are, of course, looking forward to collaborate on these and all other topics and to find new avenues for new modes of collaboration, aligning with the new mandate and potential changes that come with it. And change is a challenge for any organization. It requires dedication, flexibility, creativity. You have to step outside of the comfort zone of your institutional framework. You have to meet societal expectations and a fair amount of willingness to change. So that is not an easy feat. And it bears the risk of isolation where one very much focuses on the internal processes. And we would like to extend the HTA invitation to include us in your thought processes, include us in your work wherever we can. We stand to support and learn together with you in these new processes. But change is also an opportunity. And I think this is an amazing opportunity to build existing bridges stronger, to step into new fields of collaboration. And the basis for stronger and more integrated partnership is given by such change. And I hope that the strong and trustworthy and constructive collaboration between EMA and the HTA world in the past with UNETA, in the future with the HTA coordination group, will be a great basis for such collaboration. And these opportunities will hopefully also be enshrined in more and more structured approaches between the two. Crisis preparation is a joint effort. I think the current crisis has shown that crisis preparation and response must always be a joint effort of all players. The coordination of that is an enormous task, and I think the Commission and the players in the field have done an outstanding job in dedication to coordinate this across Europe. And it is important to keep in mind that member states, Parliament and Council have created a union-level HTA process and procedures. And of course, when we talk about crisis preparation and crisis response,
on a union level, we need to ensure that also HTA procedures are applied for such a union level response. So it is our wish and our desire to ensure that also in these elements we can collaborate and build strong and sustainable bridges and collaborations and frameworks for collaboration. The HTA coordination group, which will begin its work June this year, I think will be a perfect opportunity to ensure that strong collaboration between the institutional frameworks are established and that we can create elements that speak to the needs of the new mandate, but also speak to the needs of the wider HTA community to ensure that the work of the EMA can be met with relevant structures from member states and the HTA community in general. And with that, I try to end on a note where I would like to say that emergency definition and the use of the terminology emergency is an important one and should be used prudently. We must ensure that emergency does not become a commonplace and overloads all our systems. And with that, good luck. And we are very much looking forward to this day. Thank you for the invitation, and we're looking forward to future collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And I invite Ulrich Jäger now to take the floor for healthcare professionals.
Thank you very much, Fergus. First of all, we are very happy as healthcare professionals that EMA has obtained this extended mandate, and we congratulate you for that. And we are also very grateful that we can be part of this initiative and action. I'm representing a large number of healthcare professionals and learned societies, and as such, we feel the direct responsibility to care for patient outcome. We have to manage patient expectations, and we should provide adequate state-of-the-art care for our patients. So what are the threats and problems for healthcare professionals imposed by shortages and crises? I think the first problem we have is that we all of a sudden are unable to follow guidelines and recommendations, which we usually have, if medicines or high-risk medical devices are not available, and that will result in a direct loss of quality of care. And of course, through that, we are also forced to take other measures, to go to off-label use or repurposing of drugs, for instance. And that, you may not realize that, but that imposes a personal risk on healthcare professionals because they may come into a situation where they are not insured for their actions and will be made reliable directly. On the other hand, we have to deal with unexpected or unknown side effects if we use drugs that we are not familiar with. And that, of course, is a threat to patient safety. We have some examples of the loss of availability of medicines, for instance, immunoglobulins, during the last few years, where we almost every year have situations where we cannot manage patients with immunosuppressions. Or during the crisis, all of a sudden there was a shortage of the drug tocilizumab, which imposed a threat on patients who received cell therapies, for instance. So we could not manage our regular patients. What is the added value of the extended mandate from our perspective? So I think we welcome very much an early warning system, and we can be better prepared starting from the pharmacies to the doctors, nurses, etc. And we can devise backup strategies and, of course, better coordination that has been said before between the stakeholders will greatly improve this situation. And Therefore, of course, I think the EMA involvement also reinforces the position of healthcare professionals. What are the challenges? I think implementing a database will need human resources and administrative staff. And as healthcare professionals, we usually experience that this administrative burden will be put on our shoulders. So what we really expect is help on these resource matters and administrative burdens. I think that's very important because somebody will have to fill these databases. Then, of course, every crisis is different. We will have to be a bit flexible and adapt to the crisis altogether. And of course, there are things that we cannot influence. For instance, the strategy of the pharmaceutical industry, how they export drugs, etc. And that's out of our scope, of course. How can we help? Be involved. I think we can provide our expertise. We have numerous experts with the required competencies within our associations and societies. We can help prioritizing activities to immediate life-threatening conditions. And of course, if we have the resources, we will probably be the ones who will compile the lists for databases and registries. And with that, of course, thank you once again. And we are happy to collaborate with all other stakeholders, and we are ready to contribute.
Thank you, Ulrich. And if I could invite Casey Ammon now to speak for the patients and consumers. Casey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Fergus, and good morning, everyone. I'm happy to give a few remarks on behalf of the patient and consumer organizations working with EMA. We have a few points of initial feedback from our members of the working party that I would like to share with you briefly. Clearly, the added value of this new legislation and the extended mandate is very welcomed by patient and consumer organizations in recognition of the critical role of EMA in protecting public health. And there is a general feeling that this will help reinforce the EU's framework for crisis preparedness and management and help prevent and mitigate the impact of crisis on public health and, of course, on patients and on citizens. In particular, there's a hope that it should ensure better coordination for multinational clinical trials, something that has certainly emerged as a priority during the pandemic, to ensure consumer and patient protection against shortages of medicines and medical devices, but also to ensure consumer and patient engagement in decision-making, particularly in relation to shortages. There was some criticism or some concerns that the proposals did not go far enough, and patient organizations in particular have pointed out that since shortages are a long-standing and structural problem, it would be important to have in place a comprehensive system for monitoring, mitigating, and preventing them, not only in the context of public health crisis, but on a continual basis. And perhaps these proposals will be a step in that direction. There was also a concern that whether the resources will be there within EMA to support the greater level of patient and consumer engagement that will be required to implement these new activities. Some of the challenges in implementation that have been identified will be that setting up the European shortages monitoring platform will take some time, of course. This needs to be done very carefully and well with the right infrastructure. And as the EMA will set up several new bodies and formalize some existing ones with new tasks, it's really important that all of those bodies will communicate efficiently amongst themselves and that stakeholders involved from all the different fields will be able to collaborate. Also, what was raised is the importance of a harmonized approach to data collection and reporting. I think this was also mentioned already, so that member states will report information in a way that's consistent. And generally, civil society would like to see better public reporting at European level, especially on shortages, and improved transparency in relation to clinical trials. A particular question that was spurred by the war in Ukraine and some recent cyber attacks against European and national health institutions was how the agency is planning on protecting its confidential information. Perhaps this is a question that may be addressed later. And finally, on the involvement of patient and consumer organizations, the general message is that patient and consumer organizations absolutely must be involved in the implementation of the extended mandate. Our perspectives and our expertise must be considered in all public health decisions, and the PCWP should be regularly informed about the activities of the various steering groups and the ETF. It was suggested that PCWP representatives in these groups can act as a link between these bodies to ensure synergy and communication. But of course, the expert groups should also invite other patient and consumer representatives to attend their meetings when there is a need for more input on a specific topic. And one important case in point that's been raised several times is the critical importance of patient and consumer groups to give input on the criteria for establishing the list of critical medicines and devices. Going forward, patient involvement in discussions may be particularly relevant in any case, as they are the experts in understanding how a specific medicine is used by them and the implications, for example, of whether if it's not available and using alternatives. So in short, the expectation is that the revised mandate will strengthen the EMA's commitment to patients and consumers, that it will deliver concrete improvements, and also increased transparency and increased engagement. Our members are very keen to work with EMA in implementing the new mandate, and I see there are quite a few here today who will no doubt participate in the discussions. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of PCWP.
Thank you very much, Kajsa, and thank you to all our speakers. I really a strong message of cooperation. I think this regulation is building on systems that have been put together over the last years and really tested to the full and strengthened the collaboration across all the groups who've spoken here, and it really reinforces these possibilities for the future, not just the EMA extended mandate, but all of the other parts of the legislation that's coming forward. And as we've heard from the European Commission, DG Sante and HERA, and also Ecdc, I think the last years have shown the value of cooperation and the value of listening to all of the voices in the room and making sure that we capture the needs and the urgencies and connect on those. And I'm sure that I think it's really beneficial that we will have the patients and consumers and healthcare professionals present in the different working groups and able to make sure that their voices and concerns continue to be heard. So thank you all for the opening statements. We'll now take a moment to share what's coming in on Slido. I can see people are already active, and I think what's really good is that this offers, it's warming you up for the larger discussion sessions and the opportunity to directly ask questions and discussion that will come with the more specific sessions on the shortages on the ETF and on the devices. But what we can see from the Slido, you can see people are voting. So the increased information on medicines availability, so more actions can be coordinated and anticipated. So patients continue having access to their medicines. This has received high votes, and I think this is something that, especially in emergency, when so many unexpected things happen, the ability to coordinate and really act fast on pending shortages to streamline the process and remove barriers is a really important feature of how this can work. And I know from the way we've worked with the Commission, with the regulatory network in Europe and with the various stakeholders from industry and other areas, that this is something that is really important, and taking quick action but having information to support that action is important. Streamlined shortage preparedness system, and the word preparedness there I think is really important as well, and helps us to be ready so that when issues arise, we can act in the quickest way possible. And I can see from the Eurodis, Francois, more union, more health policy in the union, more union in health policy. I think again, the collectiveness, the cooperation coming through is really important. Evidence-based decision-making. There's a lot about research, about clinical trials, as Sandra has mentioned, about real-world evidence, about really monitoring effectiveness and safety of the various agents, vaccines, and others that we're using. So a lot of ideas, a lot of understanding, I think, already of what we can make this deliver, but clearly the cooperation will be important in delivering that, and make sure that we have all of the activities aligned, and also that we're really bringing in good data, and the common database for shortage reporting, another key feature. A little bit more scrolling down, but really encourage everybody to keep on using the slide on and bring it in. ESMP, big challenge, but one we need to work carefully on. And I've heard a number of people comment and seen in the chat on the need to be clear on terminology, need to be clear on the data and the standardization of data that we're using, and make sure we have a good common process for doing that. Quality and availability of devices and medicines to cover the emergencies. The devices are, of course, a key feature of this, supporting both the management of shortages, but also the scientific input in the assessment of devices. More preparedness again, shortages monitoring, better preparedness. So I think really good overviews. So I think, again, ultimately, this is about saving lives, reducing risks, acting quickly and as quickly as we can, both in managing shortages and underpinning the development of new medicines to respond to health emergencies. We're almost at the bottom there, are we? So keep going down. So I think all again, more support for the different aspects. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all our speakers and to everybody for being active in the Slido. There'll be opportunities to put hands up and ask questions as well in the next sessions. So with that, I think if we break now for coffee, we have a 10-minute coffee break, and we'll start promptly again at 10:40 with the next session. Thank you very much.